Okay, so back to our question. Is satisfaction of population a condition that is required for the existence of the political authority? We've mentioned that precisely in a non-democratic regime, the satisfaction of population is not a condition for the existence of the political authority, because this political authority may exist regardless to the satisfaction of population. However, we can say that the satisfaction of population would guarantee that this kind of political authority would remain and would not collapse. And so we can reach to a conclusion that the continuity of the political authority is linked only with the satisfaction of the population. This is in brief. One of the main characteristics of the political authority is that this political authority of the government, it has kind of juristic personality, because personality or kinds of person in law are two kinds. One of them is a natural person, which is the human being or the individuals within a community, while the other type is the juristic person, who is not of a human being character. So the company, for example, is granted the personality which enables the company to practice its acts according to the provisions and rules of the law, whether it is of international or a national character. So back to the political authority. The political authority is an independent legal unit, so it is different and distinct from the rulers who runs such a political authority. So the president, for example, has a nationality, has a legal personality, has whatsoever. So he has a legal personality, but this personality that he enjoys is distinct from the legal personality, juristic personality of the political authority itself. This political authority, having this kind of personality, would make it able to practice and exercise various legal acts. So also it has its own asset, or what we call the dhimma al-maliyya. So it has own financial resources, and it doesn't take responsibility for the acts or for the financial special and private acts of these rulers. But it doesn't mean that the political authority doesn't take responsibility for their official acts when they are acting on behalf of this political authority. Number three, one of the main also characteristics of the authority or the political authority is that despite the fact that this political authority or the government, or to be more precise, the authority is divided into three types: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial or the judiciary. Despite the fact that this authority is divided, it doesn't contradict with the fact that this political authority at the end is a unified one legal juristic person, or it has a united legal personality, one authority. It is divided into three types just to make the process more impartial and without any breach to the principle of separation of powers. So this is number three. The last and the most important character of the political authority is that this political authority is a permanent and stable one. It has a permanent and stable nature. It means that the political authority, the deeds of the political authority, is a continuous one, is a permanent one. It doesn't mean that the rulers or those people who runs the political authority or who run the political authority are stable and cannot be disposed. In a nutshell, any person, the president or the prime minister or anybody else who is representing the political authority can be disposed. He can be removed from the political authority. But the deeds and the acts of the political authority that they committed on behalf of this political authority would not be removed and they will be permanent and stable. So the permanence and the stability nature, they linked with the deeds of the political authority. And this would lead to some of the impacts and results. Number one is regarding the legislation, and some of these impacts relating the obligations of the state, and number three regarding the treaties of the state. And let we just illustrate what do we mean by the impacts of the permanence nature or the nature of stability regarding the political authority. First of all, regarding legislations, when they are promulgated during the rule of a certain government, these legislation would not collapse if this government is changed or disposed. So, if the government of the prime minister, or in the era of the government of Prime Minister A, promulgated some laws in his era, then this government was disposed by the people through a revolution or something like that. Then in this case, these legislations shall remain. The only way to change such laws is by amending them through the parliament. So this is regarding legislation. So legislation would not collapse if the rulers are disposed. The legislations or these legislations must remain unless otherwise provided. Unless they are amended or even revoked by the new government or the new parliament or whatsoever. Number two, the obligations. If the state concluded some transactions with another state, which made this state in debt or in loans, then in this case these debts and these loans would not collapse if the government was disposed of something. So the only way to get rid of these obligations is either to obtain a waiver or to fulfill them and to pay back the debts or loans to their state. So also like legislations, exactly, obligations and legislation would remain and would continue despite the fact that the rulers of the government or the last government or the previous government was collapsed. So they are linked with the political authority and they do not link with the rulers. So the change of rulers doesn't lead to the collapse of these legislation obligations. Number three, and finally, the treaties. Actually, treaties concluded during the rule of a certain government would not collapse if this government is changed or disposed. So if Mahmoud Abbas is the president of Palestine in his era, he concluded a treaty with another state, then Mahmoud Abbas was disposed or died and a new election was made and held, and then the population of the Palestinian state elected a new president. This doesn't mean that the treaties that were concluded in the era of Mahmoud Abbas will be collapsed. They would remain. They would remain unless the previous collapsed government is a colonial one. This is an exception. So any treaty concluded in the era of a government would not change if this government is changed or was a change. So in this case, we reach a conclusion or a result that the treaties, obligations, and legislation shall remain. And this is what we meant by saying that the political authority has a stable and a permanent character. There is an exception to treaties which can collapse when the government is a change. Actually, this happens in cases of independence. If there is a kind of colonial government, and this colonial government concluded some treaties in behalf of the state which is occupied by this colonial state, then in this case, if this colonial government is disposed, then in this case the new state, the new independent state would reject or would refuse to work with the treaties that were